Today I am out here on a very misty morning to honour the life of Aldous Huxley, a man who has come to be a somewhat controversial figure, although perhaps he always was. Um, I have been profoundly inspired by the man over the years, more by his character and the anecdotes of what he was like as a man than by the books that he wrote, because they weren't exactly inspiring in the traditional sense. Um, my first encounters with Aldous Huxley probably came through his book, The Doors of Perception, Heaven and Hell, which is a profound book that recounts his first experiments with mescaline. This is a chemical synthesis of the active ingredient that comes from a plant called peyote, which was a medicine used by the Native Americans ceremonially for a very long time. And when the biologists and psychologists that were conducting the experiments into mescaline were first getting reports back of these extremely profound experiences, they desperately wanted people with incredible articulacy to participate in these experiments. And Aldous Huxley was indeed one of the first people they requested to participate. And that led to this book, The Doors of Perception, Heaven and Hell, which, of course, the band, The Doors, named themselves after. And it became a seminal book in the 60s and 70s because it was dealing with the West's first major incursions into the world of psychedelia. So this was an important book for me in my late teens when I was beginning to experiment. And it also then led to me reading Brave New World. Now, I'd been really deeply moved by 1984 when I was in my early teens. I was lucky enough to go to a school that read that as part of its standard literature. But Brave New World painted a new kind of dystopia that was in a way even more disturbing, because instead of it being based on control and totalitarian power and rule by fear, it was ruled by a kind of utopic loving kindness, whereby people were given as many drugs as they wanted and as much sex as they wanted, and were entertained and purportedly living a rather free and delightful existence, whereas actually there was a much more sinister form of control going on. There was a caste system, and um, and really, to be an individual in that world came at very great expense. And the Brave New World, I think, I mean, it's interesting. I ran a youth discussion group once on the question of, are we more like 1984 or are we more like the Brave New World? What does this current civilization look like? And for a long while I was thinking it was a little bit of both, but now it definitely seems to be tending towards the vision of the Brave New World, the dystopic vision of the Brave New World. And for this reason, some people have thought that Aldous Huxley was one of those people that was involved in pre-programming, that he was an agent of evil that was kind of publishing a blueprint that was to go to world leaders to say this is the way we should be going. My feeling contradicts that somewhat. Aldous Huxley came from a very rich and very influential family. There's no doubt that his father and I believe his brother have some rather shady connections that seem very dubious and connected to elite power. I mean, Aldous Huxley was on the fringes of the aristocracy, but he struck me as being that young, pertinent, questioning son that didn't necessarily go along with his father. it's not often that that sons just imitate fathers and accept. In fact, it's very common to have a natural rebellion against one's father. And so, yeah, for me, one cannot judge the son by the sins of the father. I believe is a cliche that is commonly used, but I think it has some truth to it. And to me, I think he probably partook in conversations and witnessed people saying things that were so utterly frightening to him of a totalitarian nature that he felt he had to put to pen a kind of a picture of another way in which the world could be controlled. Um, but that's all supposition. I can't be sure of that. I mean, one of the reasons that I trust Aldous Huxley as such is because I very much like his spirit when he speaks. Um, I find him utterly charming. Now, it's true that there are psychopaths that are completely charming, but there's something about his laugh and his fascination that just begets friendliness. His wife was an absolutely wonderful woman. I've heard Aldous Huxley speaking at length. I've read Laura Huxley's biography and autobiography and heard accounts of him through Alan Watts and Krishnamurti and people whom I have a great deal of respect for. So altogether, I've kind of put a portrait together of Aldous Huxley that tells me that he was a good soul and that he was doing his best to try and alert humanity to the dangers of a beneficent totalitarianism, which is something that we're maybe on the edge of now. Aldous Huxley isn't someone I agreed with completely. He was absolutely persuaded that the world was going to suffer from overpopulation. And I'm not convinced of that at all. I'm someone who's very inspired by Buckminster Fuller, one of the greatest engineers of this century, and he, like Elon Musk, who again is a controversial figure, but also absolutely believes in the Earth's carrying capacity. I mean, it's really clear that if we took all the people on the planet at the moment and stood them in one place, it wouldn't even fill, I believe it's like Manhattan, like a small island in New York. And undoubtedly, there's just huge amounts of space on this planet that are completely deserted, and there's plenty of water. From an engineering perspective, it's possible that Earth could be carrying many, many more people, and to be able to do it in a way which respects the environment. Unfortunately, many of the technologies that we're using at the moment, including this phone that I'm recording on, are not exactly developed in harmony with human beings or nature as a whole. And yet, these are things that take a long time to master, and civilizations don't happen overnight, and the challenges that we face must be conquered one by one. All this to say that although I don't agree entirely with everything that Aldous Huxley said, the works that he brought to the world were utterly inspiring. I've just mentioned a couple of books. I've actually read quite a few of his books, and they're all at the very least entertaining, many of them deeply thought-provoking, and I highly recommend all of them. Certainly A Brave New World, if you've never read it, it is definitely to put on your reading list. Aldous Huxley had many personal trials through the course of his lifetime. At one point, he nearly lost his sight completely, although I do believe it recovered somewhat, but for a period of his life he was operationally blind. He learnt Braille and still managed to write. In fact, I think it was part of what enthused him to really get to work. That also puts his world into I was taught music by a blind man when I was young and spent a fair amount of time in his company, and just the very essence of what it is to operate without eyesight in the world is a powerful thing to confront and overcome. And also, he chose to leave the world in an absolutely remarkable way. Laura Huxley's account of his departure is beautiful and inspiring, and um, her book is called This Timeless Moment, and it's also worth reading. So, all in all, I'd like to take a moment to offer thoughts and gratitude for this man, Aldous Huxley, for having been on this earth and charmed so many people with his wit and his incredible knowledge. What a thirst for knowledge that man had. Um, Thanks to Aldous Huxley.